everybody. All right, it's kind of late. It's about 2:30. I wanted to get this out before I go to bed because I did have an awesome lesson today, and we were talking about chord structures and some voicings. Let me get this all set up here. Now, you can take. We were focusing on our major seven for this specific lesson, but what I'm about to get into, you can experiment and use for your dominant seven and your minor sevens as well. So what tends to happen is when we go from our open chords to our bar chords to then our sevens, before we get into all of the extensions, the 13s, the 9s, the sharp 11s, all that good stuff, we tend to just take a bar chord form, right? The bar chord, a major bar chord here. We were working with F today, so F here and F here, right? Root note on the 6th string, root note on the 5th string, and then just make those into a major 7, right? So up here we've got, instead of just straight across, 8, 10, 10, 10, we do 8, 10, 9, 10, right? Now, I don't put an 8 on the bottom here, right? And I'm going to explain why. I have this note, my 3rd of the chord, kind of dangling there at the top. And then down here, we've got our F major, right? And then our F major 7 would have an E natural, so we get that E in there. So we're basically just kind of playing nothing on the top, and then 3, 3, 2, 1, 0, right? That tends to be the more popular form. Some people will put their thumb on the bass. So moving from there are other ways to play these chords that do give us a much different sound. Understanding the intervals within the chord. And that's why this is workable with all of the other chord forms. Now, I'm not going to get into the extensions, into the 9s and 11, sharp 11s, 13s, all that good stuff, because I want to focus really on these 4-note chords, or really just the major 7, which the intervals are a 1 to a major 3rd is a major 3rd. Your major 3rd to a 5th is a minor 3rd of a jump, right? And then your 5th up to the natural 7 is another major 3rd, okay? So there's a lot that you can do when you understand how those intervals interact with each other when they are next to each other, okay? So what I mean by that is we took this form of our F major 7. We actually switch it to F in the bass, nothing on the A string, right? And then my major 3rd, which is 2, 2nd fret, and then 2nd fret for my major 3rd. Natural 7, major 3rd, and then my 5th down the bottom, okay? So I got 2, nothing, 1, nothing, 2, 2, 1, 1, nothing, 2, 2, 1, okay? Now, this fit this was the actual form in the song, in the composition that we were working with. The reason being, it has a very dark sound. The fact that it's lower and it's not up here, okay, is giving us a little bit more of a darkness. We're utilizing this lower part of the guitar, right? The other thing too is there's a dissonance in the major 7 chord, obviously. A root note and a major 7 are a half step apart, even though they are kind of floating. If we are doing it in this instance as a 7 apart, right, still sonically they are a half step apart. So what we're setting up now is the foundation of this chord being that first jump as an F and an E, almost clashing with each other, right? Now, once we add from here, from that E, a perfect 4th, right, up to our A, softens that sort of shakiness. It has a lot of shakiness. That softens it a little bit because that's our major 3rd, right? And then that natural 7 creates this, which is a little bit more pleasant as a perfect 4th interval. And then from our major 3rd to our 5th, it's just a minor 3rd sound on top of that, okay? So that tends to soften, like we were saying, the distance of the bottom, but it still gives us a nice shakiness down there, right? Or if you want to play it kind of that way. What I don't do in this instance either is playing the E on the bottom, or I'm sorry, I guess on the top, on the bottom string. Because if we're dealing with only 6 notes at a time, in this case 5 notes at a time, if I were to play that E at the bottom, you want to be careful with what you're doubling in the chord. So in this chord, that now means I would have 2 E's, 2 natural 7s in this chord. All right, and I prefer not to. I like when my extensions, if I'm using a 7 or a 9 or 11, I like when, depending on where they're going to sit in the chord, I like just having one, because just one of those compiled with a natural major or minor, depending on what you're working with. In this case, a major chord with a natural 7 in there. That's the color tone that I personally really like. You know what I mean? And not doubling up on that, because I think it starts to pull away from that sound. This is just a little bit too reminiscent of an A minor, which I think is great. But with that F on the bass, I'd rather, that to me is a little bit more of an F major 7 sound. Now, if I want to do this, right, have that F on the bass, and then just go for an F, C, F, A. So now I have 1, 5, 1 major third, 5, and then my major 7 there at the bottom, right? That to me now just sounds like a power chord major sound. Just a, and I mean power chord, and I really mean that because now my first interval is a 5th, right? Is that perfect 5th sound all the way down to the bottom. So I'm utilizing the lower notes of the guitar, but I'm giving this perfect 5th power chord sound as the foundation. Right? So now this whole chord, this whole structure is built on these power intervals. Perfect 4th, or I'm sorry, perfect 5th, perfect 4th, major 3rd, minor 3rd at the top. Now minor 3rd obviously isn't as pleasant sounding as a major 3rd. So now it doesn't start to get into any of the darker intervals until you get to the top of the chord. And then a major 7, a major 3rd, for the natural 7 on the top, right? So now you're laying power intervals, perfect 5th, perfect 4th as our bass, right? And then the next interval you're introducing that has a little bit more of a color is a major 3rd, and then after that a minor 3rd, and then after that another major 3rd which introduces the natural 7. I personally that wouldn't have such a melancholy or almost confusing sound. I really like the major 7 in a songwriting context, because it does have an essence of everything is okay, but it's just not resolved yet. Right? You kind of get that idea. This has less of that, has a little bit more shakiness on the bottom. Right? Of course, rhythm and picking patterns have a lot to do with that. So that being said, now, if I move up and I just take the same thing here, and I have my F, I have now that power chord structure as the opener, but then I throw my major 7 there, right? I have a power interval, a 5th, then a major 3rd, right? And then a 4th to introduce my major 3rd there. Like I said, that was the reason that I don't usually play this on the bottom, because that's my 5th. And there is almost seemingly no reason to have a 5th floating above that chord, you know? In fact, when you're playing any chord, really, the 5th is implied unless it's a diminished 5th or an augmented 5th. You know, so that's why a lot of you know, in a composition or even in an improv or like kind of a jazz jam, is taking the fifth away from the chord, and letting the bass sort of decide what that fifth is. You know, if you were going to do like a minor 7 chord, taking the fifth out, and then it would be in the bass to apply the fifth unless it was a diminished, you know. Augmented obviously is not used all that much, as much as diminished is, which also isn't used that much. So now, so that kind of makes sense, and you could hear this. That has a power structure there at the bottom. A major third starts adding some color, so it's not going to shake it too much in the middle, right? And then a power interval of fourth, not quite as powerful as the fifth, but still there at the top. Now this is a minor third at the bottom, but it doesn't, because it's the fifth of the chord at the top, it doesn't have that color tone to it, to me. Right? If you guys hear that, if I take that out, I just think that chord sounds a little bit better. So now we can darken the chord. One way to do that, to darken the chord, is not have the intervals spread out and have the intervals literally stacked on top of each other. So in this, I have my root note, and then my fifth is next. I'm missing the third, you know, in there, and that's why it creates that power interval. So let's do this. I have now my F, which is 8, 7, which is my major third, 9, which is my natural 7 now, right? There's no fifth in there, and if there were to be a fifth in there, again, it just to me always sounds strange being at the top. So that ends up being this warmer introduction. I have a major third to start it, right? A major third in the bottom, right, isn't a power interval, so it does have a little bit of a looser foundation. That perfect fifth there gives a little bit of strength to introduce the natural 7. You know, so I personally like these. I like these. If you guys look, if that's my F major 7, I have my root major third natural 7. If I go down here and I do a 7 5 7, it's my minor 7, root minor third flat 7, right? Or if I were to go and do a dominant 7 up here, the G, I would have 10 9 10. I personally like those. They definitely have a place, whether it is going to be in a sort of, almost sounds like a little organ-ish to me. Of course, I'm on an acoustic guitar in a living room, but, you know, and even, you know, that kind of a sound, or to pick through. So this is how to think about delivering these chords with your extensions. Now, this also goes on into figuring out what you want on the bottom. So now you've kind of figured out the intervals, right? What intervals you want to create strength on the bottom, to create unease on the bottom. You know, if I took this that we went down here, right, that first form, and I have that major 7 there that creates that unease on the bottom, I'm going all the way from a root to my 7th, right? That means I'm not hitting my 3rd, and I'm not hitting my 5th. I'm going right for the 7th. So if I were to hit my 3rd there and do, you could hear how much different that sounds, right? If I went, rather than, right, it just sounds so much different. What I really like about that major 7 too is that it is the 3rd of the chord. It's that minor chord with then the bass added. So let me kind of go into that, because people, if you're dealing with the numbers, people, you know, we all tend to look at the numbers a little bit differently. So if I have it's an A minor with an F now on the as the root, you know what I mean? So you can mess around with that, you know. that's something worth thinking about if you're getting into composition. Then the next place from this is now you have your interval structure, your power intervals. If you want to skip and have a wider, more airy chord structure, or if you want to cramp it down and have that darker, richer chord structure. The other thing is, what do you want as the bass note? Okay, so same thing, the root as the bass, and then from there you can decide the shakiness. Your fifth as the bass, that's going to be the next more stable. God, I'm not speaking all that well. Sorry, guys, but it will be not as stable as the root, right? But still have a stability to it. So, because if I take this, whether it's that form, it's not creating any unease. It sits really nicely. But then from there you can decide. You could fifth in the bass, right? But I'm going a power interval, 5 to the root note, and then another 5, so probably wouldn't do that. I'd do 5 root note, third, 7. Right? Changes the sound a little bit. Okay, so let's move in now. Let's do the third as the root note. Or we could even do the 5. Let's stay with the 5 for a second. You guys are thinking what we're really getting into here. If you went 5, major 7 now, right? 5, major 7 on the bottom. Let's see if let's figure out how to do this. 5, major 7. Then I would have another 5 here, so I don't want that. 5, major 7, major 3rd, root note. Right? That is incredibly uneasy, mainly because I'm starting off with a major 3rd, right? I have my lowest note, and then my interval's a major 3rd. That is going to imply a C major, right? But then it's like, okay, well, is it a C major 6? Once I throw this on top, you hear that at the top there, right? It's almost like if you were gonna kind of give it like a. There it is, right? So interesting sound. I could have the just going right for the 3rd, so my 5th on the bottom, and then go to the 3rd, and then major 7 maybe, root note, like however you guys want to structure these now. So that 5th is going to give you a more stable sound on the bottom, not quite as much as the root. The 3rd is going to be much less stable. All right. So if I were to do an F major, let's see, F major 7, root note, 3rd, 5th, 7, but I were to throw my 3rd in the bass, you could hear that 3rd in the bass is very unsettling, and my first interval is a flat 6, my 3rd to my root, right? It almost wants to take it down there, right? So now if I were to take that, have my 3rd in the bass, but then go right for major 7, right? Now what's happening is just like we had this over here with I had my 5th on the bass, and I created a major 3rd in the beginning. That's going to imply that that's the root note. That's going to be the same here, right? If I have that interval, that 5th, gives me a very A sound. So now, how am I going to fix that? So, this now, if I have that 3, major 7, 5, and then my root note here, major 7, 5, my root note there, it almost just sounds like an A minor with a 6. You know, and that may throw off that chord structure. And it may come off as an A minor flat 6 or A minor flat 13 if you had a G in there. So these are all things to mess around with. And in the last part of this, what's really cool, I think, getting into some of these ideas, is taking some of these intervals and fooling people, and fooling the ear, or I should more say, like, give the ear a bit of a surprise. In this instance, like if you did like, right, if you built that up and introduced it almost as an A, you know, but then you could have the other guitar doing, you know, I don't even know. Right? My major third, my root, or my major 7, my natural 7, and my root, literally that chiming in on that half step, and then my 5th up here. While this is doing, right? That now, pulling those apart and you're having 2 different instruments playing these, you're creating such an odd sound by delivering this almost A power sound at the bottom, right? But then at the top, you're giving it that F major 7 sound. Right? So some ideas I want you guys to take away with, a little bit more of, I don't know if that's necessarily advanced. I don't even know if I really consider myself an advanced guitar player, but just something cool to get into. I know this was long. I haven't done a video like this in a while, so it was cool, man. Thank you guys for joining. I'm going to go to bed. Take care, guys.